The air hung heavy with the scent of dust and forgotten memories as Clara weaved through the tightly packed stalls of the Elmwood Flea Market. Still raw from the sudden loss of her husband, John, 6 months prior, she found a strange comfort in the bustling chaos. It starkly contrasted with the suffocating silence that had settled over their once laughter-filled home. Lily, her 8-year-old daughter, trailed behind, her usual boundless energy subdued. Ever since John's passing, she would hide herself in a world of whispering conversations with unseen friends. Clara understood imaginary friends were a normal part of childhood, but whenever they arrived at the flea market, she would often talk of a new friend. Though Clara could not see it, she dismissed it as another one of Lily's newfound imaginary friends that she taught of. Though this time, this imaginary friend felt a bit different. Every time after Lily finished speaking to it, she would often look at Clara, often than not. She would seem as if she was possessed, and in her gaze, whenever she spoke to it, a hint of something secretive lurked hidden. And perhaps, afraid, as they walk along the flea market's road, the hint of fear in Lily's eyes is stuck in her mind. Then, a glint of gold catches Clara's eye from a cluttered stall overflowing with trinkets. Pushing through a throng of bargain hunters, she found the source, a miniature dollhouse nestled amongst chipped teacups and dusty picture frames. Unlike the mass-produced plastic houses in store, Lily seems to be attracted to this one, and by looking at it, it seems like it was a handcrafted masterpiece, designed delicately, with Victorian shingles adorning the roof. Tiny stained glass windows cast jewel-toned reflections, and an intricate wrought iron fence encircled a perfectly manicured lawn. A pang of nostalgia shot through Clara. It reminded her of the dollhouse her grandmother had painstakingly built for her all those years ago. A dollhouse that held countless hours of imaginative play, a world where anything was possible. Maybe, just maybe, this could be the bridge that reconnected her with Lily. A way to chase away the shadows that clung to them both. The old vendor, a woman with eyes as sharp as chipped emeralds, cackled when Clara inquired about the price. "Ah, that one," she rasped, her voice like dry leaves rustling in the wind. "Been here a long time, waiting for the right owner." Clara brushed off the woman's cryptic words, attributing them to a touch of theatricality. However, Lily, who had been trailing behind listlessly, perked up at the sight of the dollhouse. Her eyes widened in wonder as she bypassed Clara and approached the stall. "Mommy, look!" Lily exclaimed, her voice filled with a forgotten spark of excitement, pointing at the miniature house. "It's so beautiful. Can we get it?" "Even Noelle likes it," Lily exclaimed. "Noelle? Is it the new friend that you tell stories about?" Lily nodded. She said that it looks exactly like her old home. Clara hesitated, momentarily caught off guard by her daughter's sudden enthusiasm. Lily, sensing her hesitation, launched into a full-blown begging campaign, her voice rising in pitch with each plea. "Please, Mommy, please. It's perfect for my dolls. And just look at the tiny furniture. We can set up a tea party," and Lily's words tumbled over each other, her excitement infectious. Clara couldn't help but smile, a welcome change from the somber silence that had filled their home lately. As Lily continued her enthusiastic barrage, Clara could not resist her daughter's persuasive powers. Negotiating with the vendor, Clara surprised herself by driving a harder bargain than usual. determined to get the dollhouse for Lily. The vendor seemed almost eager to part with it, practically throwing it at Clara for a lower price than initially offered. As Clara wrapped her hands around the cool wood of the dollhouse, a strange shiver ran down her spine. It felt watched. Dismissing it as nerves, she paid the woman and hurried away. The weight of the dollhouse strangely comforting in her arms, a symbol of a rekindled spark in her daughter's eyes. Back home, Lily's eyes widened with delight when she saw the dollhouse. "It's beautiful, Mommy," she exclaimed, her voice tinged with a hint of something else, a hesitant awe. As Clara set it down on the table, a loose floorboard creaked beneath it. A moment later, a soft sigh, barely audible, seemed to emanate from within the miniature house. Lily tilted her head, her gaze flickering to an empty corner of the room. "Did you hear that, Mommy?" she whispered, her voice barely above a breath. Clara forced a smile, her heart pounding frantically against her ribs. "Hear what, honey?" Lily shook her head, a flicker of doubt crossing her features. "Maybe not," she mumbled, but her eyes darted back to the dollhouse, a spark of curiosity igniting within them. That night, tucked into her bed, Lily confided in the darkness. "Thank you for the new house," she whispered, her voice barely a murmur. "It's even prettier than the last one." A long, chilling silence followed. Then, from somewhere within the room, a voice so faint it seemed like a figment of imagination, came the reply, "You're welcome, child." Clara, unable to sleep, lay in the darkness, a knot of unease tightening in her gut. Had she just imagined it? Or was there a whisper of something? The arrival of the dollhouse in their home was a turning point, a beacon of light in the otherwise somber atmosphere. Lily, her usual glint back in her eyes, spent hours meticulously arranging the miniature furniture, her whispers filling the room with fantastical stories of families living within the tiny walls. Clara, initially relieved by her daughter's renewed engagement, found herself inexplicably drawn to the dollhouse as well. The intricate details, the hand-painted wallpaper depicting a whimsical forest scene, the tiny oil paintings hanging on the miniature walls, it all held a strange allure. There was a sense of history to it, a whisper of forgotten lives lived within its confines. One afternoon, while dusting, Clara swore she saw a flicker of movement in the upstairs window. Blinking, she dismissed it as a trick of the light. Yet, the feeling of being watched persisted, a prickling sensation at the back of her neck whenever she lingered near the dollhouse for too long. The first truly unsettling occurrence happened a few nights later. Clara, awoken by a faint thump, found Lily standing beside her bed, her eyes wide and terrified. "Mommy," she whispered, her voice trembling, "the dolls moved." Clara followed Lily back to her room, her heart pounding against her ribs. The dollhouse stood bathed in the soft moonlight filtering through the window. Inside, a tiny porcelain doll that Lily had meticulously positioned on the armchair was now lying face down on the floor. "Maybe it fell," Clara offered, unconvincingly, her voice strained. But the way Lily clutched her arm, her fear palpable, sent shivers down Clara's spine. "Let's go back to bed, sweetie. It's not good to stay up late." Oh, okay, Mommy." After reaching Lily's bedroom door, Clara suddenly felt a terrible sensation in her stomach. It was as if an indication to Clara that something was wrong. Regardless, she pushed the door open, just to notice that there was Lily inside, peacefully sleeping, pale at what she saw, whispering breeze caught through her neck. "What's wrong, Mommy?" Claire turned, only to find nothing. Scared, she hurriedly went back to her room, only to leave Lily's door open. As the day went by, Lily became more distant than usual, and the incidents escalated in frequency and intensity as well. Objects within the dollhouse would inexplicably change positions. A book lying open on a miniature table. A tiny rocking horse tilted precariously on its stand. Sometimes, faint whispers seemed to emanate from the dollhouse. A child's laughter barely there, a mournful sigh that hung heavy in the air. Lily, initially excited by these mysterious happenings, as she called them, began to exhibit a behavior change. She became more withdrawn and prone to staring intently at the dollhouse for long stretches of hours, her lips moving silently as if she was engaged in a conversation with someone or something that no one else could hear. Her imaginary friend Noelle, once a source of comfort, now seemed to hold a darker presence. Lily would speak of Noelle in hushed tones, and every time she spoke of her voice, Lily's voice would sometimes be laced with a strange reverence, and sometimes even a hint of fear. Clara, who felt increasingly alarmed, tried to downplay the events, attributing them to Lily's active imagination. But the weight of the evidence, the undeniable shift in the atmosphere, gnawed at her, especially after what she experienced the night before. One particularly unsettling evening, stormy winds clouded the city, and Clara was working until late. As her shift had ended, she drove back home. Arriving at her home, silence filled the space around, only to be broken by the rhythmic tick-tock of the grandfather clock. Turning on the lights, a blood-curdling scream pierced the silence. Her heart hammering in her chest, Clara raced towards Lily's room. The door flew open to reveal Lily standing in the center of the room, her back to the dollhouse. The room was plunged into darkness, the only light filtering from the hallway, casting an eerie glow on the scene. "Lily!" Clara cried, her voice cracking with fear. Lily slowly turned, her face illuminated by the sliver of moonlight. Her eyes, usually bright and full of life, were wide with terror, her pupils dilated. A single tear traced a path down her pale cheek. It talked to me," Lily whispered. "Who, Noelle?" Lily shakes her head. "No, Mommy, it was something else," her voice barely a tremor. "It said my name." The air crackled with an unseen energy. Suddenly, the window opened, and a cold gust of wind swept through the room. With the sudden lightning rage and rainwater, the storm raged on. Initially, Clara blamed the weather for the sudden mishap. But suddenly, a power outage swept through the house, and at that moment, something came out from the darkness. A disembodied voice, raspy and filled with sorrow, echoed in the room. "Lily," it rasped. Clara stumbled back, a gasp escaping her lips. Lily, tears streaming down her face, clutched her mother's arm tightly, her body trembling uncontrollably. At that moment, Clara knew. The dollhouse was no mere plaything. It harbored a presence, a spirit trapped within its miniature walls, and for some reason, it had fixated on Lily. The whispers, the strange occurrences. It was all a chilling prelude to something far more sinister. Fear coiled in the pit of her stomach, but a fierce maternal protectiveness burned brighter within. She had to protect her daughter, no matter the cost. Clara's mind raced with a frantic mix of terror and determination. Saw the window of opportunity as the window was now open, She had the idea to throw the dollhouse out of Lily's room from the second floor, hoping that with the height, it would do some damage. Playing it into action, Clara, with no hesitation, picked the dollhouse from the top and threw it out as far as possible, only to land at the neighbor's yard. By the time the storm has settled, sleep became a distant memory, as it was replaced by a constant vigil over Lily. The disembodied voice that echoed from the dollhouse had shattered any remaining skepticism she might have clung to. There was a presence within, and it was reaching out to her daughter. The next morning, the doorbell rang. Alarmed at the sound, Clara hurriedly opened the front door. At the other side, standing in front, was their neighbor, Mr. Arbuckle, a grumpy old man who is a part of the neighborhood watch committee. Whereupon, answering the door, he proceeds to lecture Clara about the neighborhood rules and regulations, one of them being throwing unwanted objects to other people's lawns. He then proceeds to return the dollhouse to its rightful owner. With a slight grin of annoyance, she nodded, and nodded right up, until Mr. Arbuckle went back to his house. With no other option, Clara places the dollhouse back in Lily's room momentarily, as she tries to seek out help from other people. She couldn't confront this entity alone. Dismissing online ghost hunting forums that seemed more like playgrounds for the thrill-seeking than bastions of genuine knowledge, she cast her mind back, searching for anyone who might possess the knowledge to deal with the paranormal. Then, a distant memory resurfaced of a person that she thought might be able to help her, Mrs. Abernathy, an elderly woman who lived a few streets down. Known for her eccentric ways and clothing fashion and rumored connection to the occult, Mrs. Abernathy was usually a source of amusement for the neighborhood children. But in this desperate situation like this, Clara was willing to grasp at any straw that comes her way. Walking down the streets, Clara found Mrs. Abernathy pottering in her garden, a whirlwind of colorful scarves and oversized sunglasses. Apprehension gnawed at Clara as she hesitantly explained the recent events, the dollhouse, the whispers, and the horrifying voice that spoke Lily's name. Mrs. Abernathy listened intently, a knowing glint in her sharp eyes. When Clara finished, a long, contemplative silence filled the air. Finally, Mrs. Abernathy spoke, her voice raspy and surprisingly gentle. "The dollhouse," she said, tracing a finger along a vibrant flower in her garden, "is a conduit, a bridge between the living and the spirit world." Clara's heart lurched. A spirit? Is that what's talking to Lily? Mrs. Abernathy nodded slowly. "The house is steeped in sorrow, Clara. It holds the restless spirit of a child, trapped and yearning for solace." A shiver ran down Clara's spine. A child? But how? Why? Mrs. Abernathy's gaze drifted to the distance, her brow furrowed. "The details are shrouded in time," she said. "But local legends speak of a young girl who tragically perished within the very walls this dollhouse represents." A horrifying image flickered in Clara's mind, a miniature replica of a life extinguished, a soul forever bound to the dollhouse. "What can we do?" she pleaded. "This thing, it's hurting Lily." Mrs. Abernathy's gaze softened. "There is a way," she said, a hint of hope flickering in her voice. "A ritual to help the spirit find peace and allow it to move on." Relief washed over Clara, quickly followed by a surge of trepidation. A ritual? What did that entail? Sensing Clara's apprehension, Mrs. Abernathy placed a wrinkled hand on hers. "Don't worry, Clara," she said. "We'll face this together. But there's a price. This ritual will stir the spirit world. It will be dangerous. The weight of the decision settled heavily on Clara's shoulders. The thought of the ritual, of venturing into the unknown, terrified her. But the alternative, the thought of Lily falling prey to the clutches of a vengeful spirit, was unthinkable. With a deep breath, Clara met Mrs. Abernathy's gaze, her voice resolute. "We have to try, for Lily." A flicker of respect crossed Mrs. Abernathy's face. She squeezed Clara's hand once, a silent promise of support. "You know, you're the first person in a long time to ever seek my help." As she turns towards Clara with a smile, "Don't worry, dear. Let's give it our all to bring this ghost story to an end." Hearing Mrs. Abernathy's words, Clara steeled herself with determination to confront the darkness within the dollhouse, unravel its secrets, and hopefully set a restless spirit free. But as she prepared for the ritual, a chilling question gnawed at her, clouding her mind with doubt. Was the entity trapped within truly a helpless child? Or was it something far more sinister at play? A demon, maybe? And if the thing that was trapped inside was a demon, would this be enough? Or would we just be releasing something far more horrifying into the world? Questions started to arise in her doubtful mind, but seeing Lily's face pale and filled with fear, unable to sleep in her room, made it clear that she needed to exorcise whatever was inside the dollhouse. And to do that, she didn't mind reaching her hands out to someone like Mrs. Abernathy for help. And for now, she is going to stick with it and have faith in her method, and that she would not let loose something far more sinister into the world. Clara drove back home, returning from Mrs. Abernathy's house, armed with newfound knowledge, determination, and a growing sense of dread. The ritual is complex, with a series of chants and arcane symbols. It felt like a desperate gamble, but Clara knew she had no choice. The night of the ritual arrived, the air thick with anticipation. Mrs. Abernathy, her face etched with grim concentration, guided Clara through the preparations. The dollhouse was placed in the center of a cleared space, surrounded by lit candles and strange herbs that gave off an acrid scent. Lily, drowsy from a concoction brewed by Mrs. Abernathy, lay on a makeshift bed in the corner of the room. As the ritual was about to begin, Clara and Mrs. Abernathy held hands and began the first chant. A tremor ran through the floorboards. The air grew cold, and the shadows in the room seemed to writhe and twist. Lily stirred on the bed, her brow furrowed in a troubled sleep. Suddenly, a cold gust of wind extinguished all but one candle, plunging the room into an eerie semi-darkness. A disembodied growl, filled with chilling malice, unlike anything Clara had heard before, echoed through the room. And then somewhere in the room, Lily's voice could be heard. "Mommy, where are you? I'm scared." Hearing the call, Clara looked at the corner where Lily was lying, before to see her missing. Shocked, Clara stood up from her seated position and called on Lily, where a little girl's scream later could be heard, filling the once disembodied growl. Mrs. Abernathy later yelled at Clara to not answer it. "Looks like this is going to be a tough one to deal with." As Mrs. Abernathy spoke of it, Lily re-emerged from the darkness, walking around them both. "Lily, do not talk to it. That is not Lily," says Mrs. Abernathy. With a wide grin, with a raspy voice, it spoke. "You dare call upon me and disturb my slumber?" It boomed. "This place is mine, and this body will also soon be mine." Clara fought back a gasp, her voice trembling as she continued the chant. Furniture creaked and groaned, and a bookshelf across the room toppled over with a crash. Fear threatened to consume her, but the image of Lily, pale and vulnerable, fueled her resolve. The spirit's voice rose to a scream, a sound that clawed at Clara's sanity. A whirlwind materialized within the dollhouse, miniature furniture spinning wildly. As the material within spun the items inside, so did its effects on the items outside, making the surroundings topple over each other. "Leave my daughter alone," Clara yelled. The spirit, feeling the pain, started twisting and turning on Lily's body, making her walk on all fours. It even tried at one point to use Lily's voice to stop their ongoing ritual. "Mommy, it hurts." Clara, with a painful expression, squeezed Mrs. Abernathy's hands, feeling the increasing tension in her missus. Abernathy's hands held in the pain that Clara was giving and continued the ritual as intended. "Mommy, I hate you." Using Lily's voice, it screamed in pain. The few minutes came after. The room went silent, and on the floor, Lily was lying unconscious. At some point, the spirit left Lily's body and retreated into the dollhouse. Relieved washed over them momentarily, as soon with a bone-jarring crack, the dollhouse split open. A wisp of inky black smoke swirled within the broken frame, coalescing into a horrifying apparition. A young girl, no older than Lily, her face contorted in a mask of rage and despair, covered with its long, soaked hair, pointing its hands at Clara. It growled, and with a raspy voice it shouted at them, "I will not leave." The specter growled, then shrieked, its voice echoing through the room. "This is my home, and you are not welcome." Clara stumbled back, as a vision started to appear in her mind of a girl who seemed to look like Lily, but different. Is this a memory? Is that Lily? Wait, Nan. No, that's not Lily. Is this the dollhouse's memory? Tears stinging her eyes. The little girl, she was scared, lonely, and in pain. This wasn't a lost soul seeking solace. This was a vengeful spirit, clinging to a shred of existence. The ritual meant to help the spirit find peace had backfired, drawing out its most negative emotions. Clara scrambled for anything that could appease the enraged spirit. Her eyes landed on the small, ornately framed picture tucked away in the corner of the dollhouse. It depicted a smiling woman with kind eyes, holding a little girl in a familiar dress, the same dress the spectral child wore. With a surge of hope, Clara held the picture aloft, her voice trembling. "Please," she pleaded, look at this. This is your mother. Do you remember her?" The spirit faltered for a moment before she took the picture that Clara was holding. The rage flickering in its eyes, replaced by a flicker of confusion and a deep well of sadness. The image in the picture seemed to anchor it, tethering it to a forgotten memory of love and security. A single tear escaped the spectral child's eye as it drifted closer to the picture. In a voice choked with sorrow, it spoke, not with anger, but with a profound sense of loneliness. "Mama, I miss you. I'm scared, Mama." Clara's heart ached for the lost child. This wasn't a vengeful entity, but a frightened soul yearning for comfort and connection. Tears welled in her own eyes. "We can help you," she said softly. "We can help you find peace. And maybe, just maybe, find your way back to your mother." The spirit looked at Clara, a flicker of hope replacing the despair. Can I truly be free?" Clara, emboldened by the shift in the spirit's demeanor, continued. "Yes," she said gently. "The ritual can help you cross over, You won't be trapped here anymore." The spirit drifted closer to the picture, a semblance of peace washing over its spectral form. "Thank you," it whispered, its voice barely audible. "Thank you for helping me go home as Mrs." Abernathy began the chanting anew. The spirit embraced the image of its mother. But then, something appeared, flinging Mrs. Abernathy to the side. It lurched forward slowly, making its appearance known. Clara froze at what had just happened. As she looked onwards towards that thing, she could feel that the thing that was in front of her was no ordinary spirit, as it gives off a far more sinister aura. A man. No, a monster. With open stitches sewn into his body, part animal, part human, part male, part female, walking on two. Helpless, scared, and not knowing what to do. She did the only thing that she could think of, and that was praying to God for assistance, even though she is not an Advent believer in any religion. That was the only thing that came into her mind. As she did so, the thing faced Clara in wonder and instilled more memories of the spirit girl. And in those corrupted memories, it tells of how the girl got raped and forced rape by the adults and animals. And in those altered memories, it tells on the neglect that the girl faced leading to her eventual death. Clara was stunned for a moment before she said, "God, please smite the evil that is in front of me," which then the thing screamed in pain before pinning Clara to the wall with its spiritual pressure. But then the thing let out another scream. Clara, looking to the side, saw Mrs. Abernathy chanting fervently, then started chanting together in sync. Together, they chanted louder and louder. Before long, it let go of its grip on Clara and the spirit girl, before retreating into the shadows. Before long, they looked back at the spirit girl and asked her if still wanted to be set free, to which then she agreed. So the ritual continued as the spirit girls dissolve into a soft, glowing light. The light swirled around the room before dissipating completely, leaving behind an unsettling silence. The air warmed, the oppressive feeling lifted, and the remaining candle flickered back to life. Clara collapsed onto the floor, drained but relieved. Lily stirred on the floor, her eyes fluttering open. She looked around the room, her gaze finally settling on the broken dollhouse. "Mommy, what happened?" she asked, her voice small. Clara pulled Lily into a tight embrace, tears streaming down her face. "It's all right now, honey," she whispered. "Everything is all right." The ordeal was far from over. The dollhouse lay in pieces, a stark reminder of the darkness they had confronted. But as Clara looked at Lily, a genuine smile playing on her lips for the first time in weeks, she knew they had won a battle against a powerful entity. Even though there were lots of twists and turns, it's finally over now. The dollhouse is no longer a conduit for the spirit world. It was just another broken toy. But the question remained, what was that thing? That grotesque figure that we fought? Was that the thing that was behind the spirit girl's suffering? "That, my dear, is what you might call a demon," Mrs. Abernathy, with a worn-out voice, exclaimed. "What do you mean, demons? Demons don't exist." "Oh, they certainly do, my dear. They come in all shapes and sizes." "Yeah, right," with a smile, Mrs. Abernathy retorts back. "And you pray to God despite being a non-believer. Doesn't make you think that maybe the angel in heaven could be real, Anyway, now that it is done, I bid you farewell. Going back already, Mrs. Abernathy? Don't you want to at least stay for a meal?" "It is all right, my dear. I believe that we both needed much quality rest now that is over. But in their mind, they know that it is far from over.